Official. Dr. Davey, if you're all right with it, I'd like to get us started.
Sure, let's please roll.
Excellent. So welcome to our first budget committee meeting for our, hard to believe it, but 2021-2022 budget of CVES. Welcome. Our committee members are the same as last year, so we thank the committee members for volunteering your time to be a part of this important committee. It's really one that dives in deep into each and every one of our budgets. Today is really a general overview about where we're at now, keeping it very general. The next meeting, we dive into very detailed numbers of each of our divisions and COSERs as we start to plan for that new budget. But today we'll give you a general overview of our programs and our divisions, how things are going so far this year. We're early in the process. Give you a little bit about our budget development factors, what we're seeing now. Dr. Davey's going to share an update on the New York State financial picture as we're dealing with the pandemic, and then some general COSER discussions on some changes that we may see forthcoming for the new budget year or even throughout this year. So first item up, I'd like to just share that in the budget packet, and that was virtually to Mrs. Boyes, and Mrs. Saunders has a paper copy of it. We did include your budget committee meeting highlights. Were there any questions on that? This goes all the way back to our January 28th meeting.
Grab that piece of paper.
We do not do official minutes of the meeting. These are highlights, so we do not ask for a motion for a second on them. But that we use these to document what was discussed at the meetings. I am going to share my screen to actually help with this process. So hopefully you guys don't have to sort through documents to see what I'm talking about and what we're discussing today. Next item up is the review of our budget calendar, and I do have that up on the screen right now. For our committee members, our next meeting is December 2nd, again diving in deeper into the true financial numbers of where we're at. Just a short few months into the year on December 2nd. We will discuss what at the board meeting on December 9th, what we've discussed at that meeting. And then January 26th, we will come together again. And that's really our wrap up meeting with this committee as we start to share with you the original draft budgets for that 21-22 school year. We will present it to the board at the subsequent meeting, which is on February 10th. And then thereafter, we share it with our school superintendents, the chief school officers. We've scheduled that meeting for February 12th to meet with them and run through the budget. And our team here that's with you today with our division directors, Assistant Superintendent Gray, Dr. Davey, and myself present that budget to the superintendents, and we do invite every business official to join the meeting as well to really cover all aspects of our budgets on February 12th. Any questions about our budget timeline for this year? Jumping into our divisional updates, I will start, and similar to last year, I'll do much of the speaking here, but realize that we are working with our divisions and with the leadership of our division directors, Director Friedman with CV Tech, Director Slattery with Special Education, and Assistant Superintendent Gray with ISC, but as well as all the instructional side of CVES, and then with the general leadership of Dr. Davey on each one of these. So I'll be the voice, and I do ask our division directors, and I've asked them to allow me to try to lead the conversation here, but feel free to jump in at the end if they'd like to add any other topics, or if there's follow-up questions from the committee, I will most likely pass to them to answer those questions. So starting with CV Tech, The big point of discussion with CV Tech and item that we've been watching is the enrollment averaging in CV Tech. So this year, our enrollment average in CV Tech is 576 students. So that is, if you add up every single one of our districts, they are being billed for 576 students. Our actual enrollment, when you look at just the students that apply to our enrollment averaging, we have at the moment 607 students. So we are above that enrollment average, which is fantastic. That's great. That's where we would like to be all the time. It's a kudos to our programming at CV Tech and surviving through a tough pandemic and virtual spring season where there was high potential where we could have lost some of our first year students transitioning to our second year. I'm very happy to say that that did not happen. We also didn't fault or lose out on recruitment efforts of those first year students during this pandemic. And we have populated our building to that level of 607 students. Now you may be wondering, what is the lock-in date? Previously, that was an October 1st date. Now with enrollment averaging, that lock-in of enrollment is December 1st. So changes can happen through the month of November. Again, we are living in a pandemic, as we all are very well aware. So things can change and they will change. It happens throughout the school year. So between now and December 1, we then will have that lock-in. What we really compare this to when we try to long-term plan for CV Tech's primary budgets of 101, 102, and 104 budgets, we're looking at the year that's going to fall off. So this is a 5-year average. When I talk year, that what year falls off of the equation is where we want to be at or above in order for us to increase or maintain that enrollment average figure. So the year falling off will end up being the June 2016 number. Again, it'll be 5 years ago. And that number was 587 as part of our formula. So 587 will come off, and whatever we lock in as of December 1st, we'll replace that in the 5-year formula. So looking very good for CV Tech when we look at our enrollment average students in our high school daytime programming. Next up, item I'd like to point out is we do have our new Vision Applied Engineering. It is not broken out on the visual in front of you. On the part I'm zoomed in on, this is a large spreadsheet, and you guys do have it in PDF form, and Laura, I did print you a copy of it. But our new Vision Applied Engineering program is separate of enrollment averaging. For any new program that's created in our CV Tech division, that does get pulled out of the enrollment averaging as part of our methodology, lives on its own for 3 years. That then is calculated, taking a 3-year average of those enrollment numbers and put into the formula. So after year 3 of that program, these numbers will be used in our enrollment averaging. But right now it stands alone. We do have 16 students, and it is one session in our Plattsburgh, on our Plattsburgh campus, as well as in Mineville. So new program running there, off the ground and running, again, during a very challenging time, and good to see that happening. We've also used some grant funds from Betty Little to make that happen under the leadership of Director Friedman, Assistant Superintendent Gray, and Dr. Davey, to make that a reality for our students and a great program. Job target, we are at 29 students in our job target programming. Again, this is another one that fluctuates on a regular basis. It could change, week to week. But right now, as we look at these numbers, we do have 29 students in our job target program. When we built our budget, we had built our budget based on 38 students. So there is a difference of 9 students there. And keep in mind, this tuition rate is at $15,000, over $15,000 per student. So we do have a shortage there at the moment, and one that we're watching as we analyze our budget this year. The other item to point out is our adult and day classes. So we do have a number of adults that participate in our programming throughout the day, year 1 and year 2 programs. And we are currently at 19 students, and this is down and from where we budgeted, and we had it budgeted based on prior enrollments in our programs from adults during daytime classes, and we're actually at a number of 45 students. And the tuition rate on those is $7,600 for tuition. So we are behind in that area as well. So some areas that we are monitoring very closely at this time and working closely with Director Friedman to monitor how that's going to impact our spending and our programming as we move forward. And again, as we start to plan for our budget for 21-22, we're going to want to take that trend into consideration as we build our budget. That is my brief update of CV Tech. A lot of great things going on, and I think Michelle could talk to you for hours on the amazing programs we have going on for our students. But as a financial side of it, that's a very brief update. Michelle, anything you'd like to add or any questions from our committee members?
No, that's exactly where we are. You know, difficult to recruit for adult full day when we're running 2 cohorts. So we're pleased that we do have the 19 seats for post-secondary. I did want to point out that for the first time since I've been here, I think this is my 7th year now, I lost count, that we actually had to close enrollment for welding. We are at capacity. We cannot onboard any other students at this time. So that's a great problem to have. So far, so good.
Excellent. Any questions from the committee members?
No, I'd like to just echo what Mrs. Friedman said and really give kudos to our CV Tech team, our administrators and our staff who've adjusted to a totally unique new schedule and making it work exceptionally well. And I think, our hat goes off to everyone, but the students also are thrilled to be in person and engaged in new levels. And the other piece, and Mrs. Friedman, it's been very interesting because having the first year students together and then having the second year students, it's allowed our teachers to really adjust their instructional programs and go more in depth with the second year students and really focus on first year's entry level skills. So it's been a really positive experience in terms of that, how the teachers are doing. So kudos to our whole team and the leadership that everyone's showing. So great job.
Thank you, Dr. David. Appreciate those excellent words, and I agree with you as well. Moving now to our next division of special education division with Director Slattery and team. This sheet here, hopefully having a different format. I am just going to point out, and just so you're aware, because this sheet can get confusing, and I wanted to try to explain and direct your eyes in the right area. So where we want to look is our latest data, and highlighting is not going to work, but October 2020 is going to be really your column that you look at for enrollment numbers. And I'm going to run through each one of them to discuss with you. But when we start to build budget, what we look at is the December and January numbers. So you can see here last year, where were we at in the December and January timeframe of these coasters. So when I say the budget number, you're going to see very close to where we were at December, January. So the top one is ITSP. That is our 220 coaster. Our current enrollment is 5 at this time. Director Slattery and team are actually do have some kids on the waiting list, and we are working on processing a student to join that class as we speak. Really, this month we're expecting the person to start, and we have more on the wait list. We did budget 5.5 students for that program. We do have fluctuation in it. So that's why, we only have one class. It's a 611. We chose to budget 5.5 because throughout the year, we tend to have, kids that may come in and leave as the year goes on, but typically there's a wait list and there's time for transition built into our budget. So we're looking good with our ITSP program. Next one is the 205 COSER, or our 611 autism classes. So we budgeted for 5 classes. We do currently have 5 classes for our autism program. We budgeted 29.5 students. And you can see right in December and January of last year, we had 29.5 students. So we actually budgeted exactly what we had. Our current and our actual is 24 students in our autism class. So we do have a drop of 5 students there. In 210, our 811 life skills program, we have 8 budgeted classes. We actually had to increase that to 9 this year beyond our budget. We had budgeted 53. You can see January 2020, that's what we had. We are up 3.5 students, or to 56.5 students for an actual number. In life skills, now we're talking the 811.
Bill, did you tell your brother about voting?
Was that a question? Oh, okay. With life skills, you can see we do have a class of 3, and then we have a couple classes of 5. Those right now, I know that Director Slattery has targeted some students that in discussions with our CSE chairs and component districts that we believe some of these seats are going to start getting filled up. And I know that we have discussions ongoing for 5 or 6 students throughout our programming that we're working on transitioning to our classes. And I'll touch on that after I go over our last group, which are COSA 208, our 811 academic program. We had budgeted 12 classes. That was reduced down by 1 due to our drop in enrollment this year. So we had budgeted 82.5. You can see in December of last year, we had 82.5, and then January we had 83.5. We started this year at 69.5, and we're currently at 70.5 in that program. So that's where we did reduce down 1 class. So really what ended up happening is the class shifted from 208 academics to the 210 life skills. So that's why there was really no cut there. It was more of a shift from one program to the other. Our enrollment has dropped at 12 students. And again, we're looking at different or potential enrollment. And in particular here is Mineville. So one of the things that we did in Mineville is Lyndon Johnson is listed twice for 2 classes. So we had Lyndon covering 2 classes. So we did have the total of 9 classes, but Lyndon was covering 2 of those. We had the total of 11 classes and Lyndon was covering 2 of those for us due to a low enrollment. And you can see we had in Lyndon's classes, we had 5 and 4 to start and then 6 and 3. We are now in November, we are onboarding a student, we're up to 10. So we have actively started a recruitment process. And our plan is actually to recommend to the board to hire a teacher for that classroom, because now we have 10 students in the 2 combined. But it was a cost-cutting measure that we've done in coordination with our unions and the instructor to try to save until we actually had the enrollment numbers. We looked at cutting the class, but the impact to those 3 students would have been significant for those districts. They wouldn't have had any place for the student to go. So they did have a request that we do maintain it. We also would have had no room for growth. So if we would have cut that class based on the age range of that classroom, again, the low one was the elementary grade levels in Mineville, we would have been eliminating an option for our districts completely, and we would have lost that opportunity for growth of 5 students. And when we looked at the, do we cut the program or do we maintain it? The best route was to use 1 instructor to cover both classes. It worked out well, and now we are starting to onboard some kids. So for us in special education, what we've seen here is lower enrollment numbers, about a net loss of 15 compared to what we budgeted. That is something that we are watching closely. Some districts we feel were not anticipating open schools this long and may have been planning for remote learning rather quickly. Therefore, they were trying to educate in-house and have some cost-saving measures. They have reached out, those districts have reached out to Director Slattery, and that's why I know we have 5 to 6 students right now who are potentially joining our enrollment in these classes spread out through these coasters. So that's something that, Dr. Davey and team and we will be monitoring closely to see what steps do we have to take if those students don't actually enroll with us, or something happens where we may move to remote learning and there could be different shifts that happen. So again, we're trying to be nimble here, constantly watching these numbers, and Director Slattery updates our team, similar to Director Friedman, both update us constantly on their enrollment numbers. It's something that we watch very closely. So Director Slattery or committee members, anything, first Director Slattery, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Bell, and I think you said it, very well. Just a few points. I'm really pleased we were able to preserve programming out of our Mineville campus for our Essex County schools. That came across loud and clear as a need from our component district, so I'm really pleased with that. Secondly, you're spot on when you say we have 5 or 6 students that are currently in our intake process. Some will be in school with us beginning next week, the beginning of the week. So we're pleased with that. And then really those enrollment numbers were impacted by the pandemic. And I can think of 5 students in particular that were scheduled to be with us this fall. And then their families chose, to educate those students at home to the Commissioner's Regulations 100.10, so that homeschooling component. So those were the 3 main points, and I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Bell. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Well, can I just give also a shout out to Mr. Flattery and our special ed team for exceptionally providing in-person instruction. We do have, as Mr. Slattery has acknowledged, some students on remote, but our staff has made the transition into in-person instruction and is doing it exceptionally well, again, to everyone's surprise, and our districts, I believe, are very pleased. Mr. Slattery, you've also been showing a lot of leadership, meeting with our CSC chairs and directors very often, as well as our state ed representatives, so thank you for everything you and your team are doing to provide a really quality program in a very unique environment. So kudos to everyone. Thank you.
Any questions from our committee members? Yeah, go ahead.
Do we know how many kids pre-COVID, with the remote learning, have not come back to the building, but will anticipate it, let's say January? Do we have any idea what those numbers might be?
So, Mr. Slattery, right now, how many remote students do we have at this time?
That's a great question. Approximately 29 students are remote. We've had 4 students begin remote, and they've come back to us for in-person. And as early as or as late as today, we did have a student whose family chose to move to remote instruction. So it is fluctuating. And I think a lot of it, the families' decisions at this point in the school year is impacted by their component districts, their siblings that may be in the household and how they're being educated at that time. And we're providing a lot of flexibility and choice with our families with our approach for it. So right now that's where those numbers stand.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have a nice graphic for you, Ms. Gray, but ISC, a very important topic today, and one that, we constantly say is like a business. And Terry is focusing very closely on her coasters operating businesses during a pandemic. The struggle in ISC is the same that you would see in any other field that is in a support service in an industry. And that's really what we are. ISC is providing supports to educational institutions during a pandemic. So it's probably different than any that Ms. Gray has ever seen before, but we are in good hands in her leadership and Dr. Davies' guidance over the top of it. So first off, starting with, we have concerns on billed as used services. Billed as used services, a pandemic can limit those. We've seen it in the spring when we went remote. Our billed as used services did fall off significantly compared to prior years. Others did arise, and we did take advantage of them. But as we go through this on a daily basis, we need to be focusing on our build as use services, on how are we trending on a week-to-week basis with our districts, and then preparing for the worst that's ahead of us and ready to react to those. So, right now, it just is, we don't know what's to come, what's ahead of us, but we are expecting that there could be less uses of our build as used and something that we are monitoring on a regular basis. Terry's done a great job of not spending anything that's not billable. So if it can't be billed out to districts or billed as part of the service, she's been limiting the use of those or limiting the spending on any of those items right now to help build those protections in her budget or in our budget, the ISC COSERs, as we trend through these rough waters or potentially really rough waters. For example, a prime example is we had a typist retire, and we did not fill that position last spring, and it's still left vacant at the moment as we analyze our situation. And Terry's been doing good to shift work around to try to cover us for now. Hopefully one day soon, we'll be able to have conferences again and start those services that our districts need, trainings and so on, where that typist was really used in. So, but right now it's a vacant position, and hopefully post-pandemic, we can start to ramp up those services, which really could tie to when our new conference area is opened post-pandemic, and hopefully opening of that conference center. Hopefully post-pandemic's prior to that, right? So the other thing is expanding COSERs. So we're not sitting idle in ISC either. Our districts came to CVES and said we have needs in various ways. They said they had needs, and we're trying to meet those. And one I just want to highlight is the expansion of the technology services as well as the instructional technology equipment. So our district said they had a need. Wishwe BOCES was providing our instructional tech equipment services to some of our districts. A visit was made with Terry's leadership down to Wishwe to see what are they doing, how are they doing, and how can we bring it to the home front for cheaper, better service to our district. And we did that. And that started this year, as well as expanding tech services. We brought on a network and systems technician, and we've actually had a district come to us and ask for technology services within their district. So we're stepping up. Districts have needs, they're different needs, and our team's stepping up to do it. Assistant Superintendent Gray, anything else you'd like to add?
No, you were very thorough. So Christine and us will be meeting to do our recons and look at some of those COSERs that we do have concerns about. So we're paying close attention to those and monitoring. Others are up and running. It's just we're doing business in a different way, which is great. And we are excited about the instructional technology COSER because we are partnering with Shazy now to the end of the school year, and we may have Northeastern interested too, to some degree. We're not sure yet what. It's a little bit faster than we expected, but it's a nice slow start. So we're hoping that we can grow it in a way so that it'll be very successful. So.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Last, and it may be least, but I'll say it's not least, management services COSERs. One thing I just want to point out, this budget committee was involved in the creation of a benefit coordination office as part of our health insurance consortium and workers' compensation consortium coordination services. And that is live in action, growing as we speak. So we've hired a benefits director. That individual did start with us last month. The board appointed the person at the October board meeting. We are interviewing benefits specialists later this week. With that benefit coordination office starting officially and taking over the services of central registration and billing and many other tasks starting as of January 1, 2021. So we are well into that process. The budget committee, when we did review it and originally reviewed it with superintendents, was a full year for the service. given the financial times, CVES actually went to the drawing board and said now might not be the best time to do it during a pandemic to try to start this. Again, as of July 1 was the plan originally with this budget committee. And we went back to our superintendents and said, how about we do this? Let's tier our efforts. We'll budget for half the cost in 2021, and then we'll budget for the rest of it when we know our costs. We've hired our people. We'll build a budget as tight as we can for the subsequent year. So you'll see the 21-22 budget for that coaster will be increasing, but it's because we made a move to help try to tier the cost to districts by giving them 50% this year and then moving it to full cost the year after. So it was very well received by our districts and something that we are executing now.
So, and Mr. Bell, if I could just weigh in for one quick minute too and say, kudos to our team working with the Health Insurance Consortium. We finished the year on a very positive note with exceeding what our planned fund balance was, so to speak. So more money went into the reserves due to the pandemic. Not as many activities and surgeries and such were being completed. However, that money has been put in reserve. It's being analyzed strategically to make sure that we support the consortium, and having our benefits director or administrator on board, I think, is going to be key as well. So kudos to our management services team, Mrs. Myers, and our staff for all their work. Yourself, Mr. Bell, for helping lead that, and now our new administrator as well. So pleased for that. And Terry, I didn't acknowledge that your coasters have been doing a great job as well. And I think of all of the different staff, and you just look at, for example, not only your technology, which is expanding, but even our communications coaster. It can't keep up with the work because the demand is so high. Everything has been moved to virtual. So our teams are really supporting our districts and being very effective at what they're doing. So kudos to both management services and our instructional services teams for really jumping in with both feet and doing yeoman's work to make sure they're performing at a high level and supporting our districts as well.
Thank you, Dr. Davey. So that completes our update on the divisional program and enrollment updates. Moving now to the budget development factors. I am going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation. I'll share my screen as well, so all of you do not have to click away. There we go. And Dr. Davey, I do have a clicker for you. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Davey to provide an update on the state financial picture. And I am sharing a presentation from Questar 3 that Dr. Davey did pick up from his DS meeting to run through quickly with the group.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to just spend a couple minutes and hit a couple of highlights. Overall, this was about an hour-long presentation, or at least 45 minutes with many questions, but it really was very helpful. And Questar State Aid Financial Planning Services really provides financial support for all the districts statewide, so it really is an excellent service. And Mr. Bell and the business officials really count on this service as support.
Yep.
So just to click through a couple of the points, we are, and I'm going to jump through a number of the slides. Traditionally the funding for education comes in multiple areas: federal aid and grants, state aid and grants, and local property taxes. Many of our districts across the North Country have very high rates of state aid, and it does vary. We have some districts that don't get very much because they have a high property wealth, and such as like Keene, for example, where you have a district like Mariah or Crown Point, or even some of our districts here that have significant state aid rates that really provide over half or more of their budget. So as we look at that, and I'll just jump through the PowerPoint here, and looking at all the different factors for state aid, there's pupil counts, there's grade level, there's, residents, there's many different factors that come into play. And then many times you'll hear about the combined wealth ratio, which is really tied into not only the property wealth, but the income wealth. And many of our districts have a very high property wealth but their income wealth is low, and it really does skew the data. And I think you can understand that here in the North Country. So it makes our districts look like they're much richer than what they actually are. So with that being said, here's a couple of examples. The lowest full property value is Salmon River and Fire Island. So two vast differences, and many of our districts fall more towards the Salmon River end than the Fire Island. Okay. With that said, I'm going to jump through a little bit here, and just looking at the history of foundation aid. There was a case back in the 90s for Mrs. Boyce and Mrs. Saunders. For our board members, you'll remember the campaign for fiscal equity, which was a case that actually said a sound basic education should be funded at a level so there's equity across the state. There was an attempt to try to clarify that as well, and there were approaches to try to remedy that, but we hit a financial cliff and things really, really slowed down. So that has been a continued, issue. And, when they look at foundation aid and it's fair, predictable, and simplified, you can also see there's a lot of different and complex factors in terms of the formula. So I'm just jumping through this for a quick minute here. So really, as we look at the more current versions, and I'm going to just zero in on a couple slides, when you look back and you think back almost 10 years ago or over 10 years ago, back with the Great Recession, remember in 2009-10, the aid was frozen. There was the GEA, the gap elimination, where there were significant cuts to state aid. That's what people are afraid of is going to happen again. As we look at the different levels, even going back to 11 and 12, things started to phase in and increase. The GEA ended for all districts in 16-17. Now, when we look at those days, they're actually seeming like the good old days. Okay, so I'm going to jump through. So this is a slide that I just want to take a quick second and look at for Mrs. Boyce and Mrs. Saunders. As our board members, when you look at this, this is a scattergram of where districts fall in New York State. And there's really a lot more diversity than that. But when you look at what's the fully phased-in level of aid, that's the black line. That's what's considered, equitable funding. Now you'll notice there are a lot of districts that are listed above. In many of those districts, due to them freezing the state aid level, they're actually getting aid that they don't have the students for anymore. Okay, so it's really been frozen. And you say, well, what about the districts that are below? Okay, and it was even brought up at the DS meeting, where would New York City be? If you look at all those dots, and there's the line, the New York cities of New York State would be on the floor. Okay, so right now, that black line is about 6 or 7 feet up in the air, and the New York City would be on the floor. Rochester would be on the floor. Buffalo would be on the floor. So the bottom line is many of our districts may fall into that lower end, but the actual urban centers are even lower than that. And I think that's one of the factors that's really been looked at. Some of the other factors is the categorical aid, so we'll jump through those. And I'm not going to touch upon those because you have them all. But all of these areas are areas that the governor does go after. And many times they will go after because whether it was building aid, there's aid that hasn't been reimbursed. Transportation aid, there's questions about that being not reimbursed, BOCES aid, and so on and so forth, and even aid for disabilities. There are 2 different areas when we look at this here, the transportation aid that's come up. Remember last year, starting in March, when everyone went home, the governor said, you need to make sure that you provide food to your children. Many of our districts stepped up and said that now we're going to pay to have this food delivered. And the question was, will we get reimbursed for this by our transportation aid? The governor said, you have to deliver food. The districts paid drivers, they put gas in their buses, the aides came in and helped, and so on and so forth. Now, the Division of Budget is saying that because there weren't students on the buses, they're actually indicating that there's no legal way that they can pay for that transportation. So in that case, that's going to be a huge hit for all of our districts. So even though the governor was requiring us to deliver the food, now they're turning around and saying that they believe they're not going to reimburse that aid. Some of our districts get 70, 80, and 90 cents on the dollar for their expenses. So it's going to be a killer. And when we brought this up to our superintendents, they were speechless. And you know, and Mrs. Boyce, you know the superintendents, Mrs. Saunders, you know the superintendents. How many times have you heard our superintendent speechless? Almost never. They didn't even know what to say. And the second area too is, remember, many of our districts were willing as students with disabilities. There's STAC and there's high cost aid reimbursement that our districts receive. Many of our districts we're all ready to have our aides who are one-on-one aides stay home. We were told by our attorney and by the governor's office that our districts needed to keep our one-on-one aides and everyone employed. Now the governor's office is saying that they cannot prove that our one-on-one aides were supporting instruction, so therefore they don't want to pay the money to reimburse our district for those aides. So those are some really, really hot buttons that the district superintendents too were shocked over. The other area is that the governor has been holding back some money. That 20%, still there's no determination in there. We're really waiting for stimulus monies. So there's a couple of other things. You can see the total state aid and the enacted budgets, but you can also see kind of the comparison of the enacted budgets here. You'll notice that there's a big difference between 1920 and 2021, and also the pandemic adjustment. Really, that's when you look at that piece down here, it's over $1.1 million. That's huge. Mr. Bell, anything else you want to weigh in on those adjustments there?
Just a slip of the tongue, billion. You said 1.1 billion, 1.1 billion.
1.1 billion.
Yeah, and that's being funded by the federal government to make up for it. So when the state starts looking at aid for school districts, just to keep them even with state money, they're already starting with a $1.1 billion gap to make up just to keep people even.
Right.
It's a great point, Mark.
Okay, and then when you look at the second part, if you look at where the pandemic adjustment, you can see that 1.1 billion is really that blue area. So traditionally what happens if you don't fill that, make up for that gap, the next year it often doubles. So when you compare the fact over the years and looking at, and I'm going to go back to this slide here. So if you look at the 16-17 budget and what the potential of the 20% reduction is, it will actually bring it back below the 16-17 level if they enact those 20% reduction. Okay, so just jumping through, you can see DOB does have the divisional budget does have the ability to reduce aid and ensure there's a balanced budget. But the one thing that's happened, and you know that the governor and the DOB has withheld 20% of some of our district's money. Nothing has been put in writing. It's all been verbal. So legally, they haven't met the criteria. They haven't given the state assembly or the Senate the 10 days to weigh in and then to come up with their own plan. So legally, thus far, the governor has not legally met the standards to be able to take that money away permanently. The problem is no one knows where that money will come from if the Senate and Assembly try to come up with their own plan. Okay, so you can just see there's 3 look-back periods. The first one was April 1st through the 30th. The second is May 1st through June 30th. And the third is through December 31st. And right now, we're really waiting for the stimulus monies to see if something does come forward. We're so hopeful because that's the only way that we see this problem is bigger than our districts. It's actually bigger than the state. And I think that's the key factor. This problem is a huge national problem. It's not something that even New York State can solve. So you can just see some of the other factors here. The one point I'd just like to draw on, Mrs. Saunders, I know if you grew up and I grew up, Mrs. Boyce, many of our colleagues on the call, we grew up being regaled by our grandparents and stories about the Depression. The drop in income in New York State has been the largest in New York State history since the Great Depression. So if you want to know what's a comparison, the amount of our state revenue is, the drop is actually comparable to the 1930, when the 29 to 30 is when that hit, which is really scary. And they're suggesting that at this point, the revenue decline is $14.5 billion.
So then rich people moving out of New York.
So that, and what's the loss that they're predicting going forward? That's $62 billion. Unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable. We don't use, it's beyond even being able to rationalize. So you can just see some of the areas that they've been deferring aid. In September and October, the state did make some full aid payments. You can see the green on your slide. That's because they're legally required to by law. And then you can see the last piece, what the potential revenue reduction could look like. And it eventually would almost bring us all the way back from 20, if we do lose that 20% reduction, back to almost 09, 010. So really very, very close. When you think about all the gains that we made over those years, I mean, you can't even come up with something how to describe that.
Took us over 5 years last time.
Yes. So we're looking at a 10-year reduction, going back to where we were almost 10 years ago. That's what's really scary. So those are ultimately, we don't know what 2021 will look like, but I know our superintendents don't know either. So those are the major points I just wanted to share. And you can see they don't know what's going to happen, whether there will be permanent cuts or not. And also, what will school aid look like? Right now, there's more questions than there are answers because we don't know. And a lot of it's going to depend on federal stimulus. Okay, so that's really the end. There's other things. I mean, but for the most part, they even got into the capital exclusion for BOCES and, trying to keep our capital projects at least level for our districts. And you can see, that's something that we did try to do, and Mr. Bell worked with our business officials. So those are the major pieces. And West Star planning was very, very good. So if we can stop sharing now. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I'm going to just touch on a couple of things, and thank you, Dr. Davey, for that update. The capital budget of CVES includes our lease costs as well. So as we start to look towards next school year, we do have our ISC lease coming off, knock on wood, right? Nothing else pops up at our south building. Our intent is to be moving prior to our lease ending, which does end at the end of September. Our ISC lease is up. If we need to renew, there's a clause in our contract to renew as a safety blanket. At the time of negotiations, Terry and I were in negotiations with them. They were allowing a 1-year lease extension. So our contractors and our schoolhouse construction and Tetra Tech are very well aware that if we do not meet, they see the deadline as the end of August, is what we told them. If they don't meet the end of August deadline, we're in for potential significant cost to further lease this building. So why I'm talking about that is it's part of our capital budget. The budget is about $86,000 off the top of my head for the ISC lease. If we were to just take the lease out of that capital budget, it would be reduced from all the tax caps of our school districts. So like Dr. Davis said, Questar 3 is recommending it. We also discussed internally, and we recommend it, that we maintain a flat capital project budget, or capital budget, not capital project, capital budget of CVS. Our overall budget is about $475,000. We will want to, and we should have a goal of maintaining that as we go forward, with the long-term goal of avoiding voter-approved capital projects. So being very strategic about the work being done, have long-term facilities upgrade plans to avoid trying to have to replace roofs and so on as part of a large voter-approved capital project. We know this is very challenging for our districts right now, and we know some have incurred long-term bonding for that project. So CVES has to be financially responsible to try to avoid those again in the near future and long-term future. So a way to do that is maintain that capital budget at its threshold. So what we'd be looking at is the ISC lease costs. We wouldn't just take them off the books because it would be a reduction on the capital exclusion of our districts. We'd want to maintain that, put into capital project funds, and work on our annual mini capital projects with those. More to come on it. With this presentation here, the one thing I heard really as I hear this message is tough financial times are ahead. We're in tough financial times. It is critical to have a BOCES providing cost-effective services to district, as well as providing them with a little bit of gravy on top, which is the aid that flows in a future year. You receive a service from us, aid flows in the next year. So that's a newfound revenue to them as well. So we should be able to provide them cost-effective services and then also give them that revenue in a future year. Does not apply to special education services, but all of our other COSERs, we need to be looking to provide that for districts. So as I'm still sharing, I'm going to bring up, unfortunately, not any better news. Dr. Davey mentioned that it's close to 50-50 in our area, state aid and tax levy for our districts on their revenue side of the house. So we talked about the state aid portion of it. Now, how's that tax cap looking? Of course, with spending being down, CPI is down for the year as well. Through August 2020, the increase was 1.21% over the same period in the prior year. So this is from New York State Association of School Business Officials. They are projecting the allowable growth factor in the formula to be lesser than 2% at this point in time. So we aren't looking at districts even getting a 2% increase as part of their tax cap. Moving from bad news and shifting to good news, the next item on our agenda is health insurance, and Dr. Davey touched on this. So just putting some numbers to statements, last year we had a great financial year. We had a $19 million net income for last year. So we made great progress. And he touched on a couple of points, and that one being the pandemic and less services being used. Services were way down. Another item is our districts did process a memorandum of agreement with their unions to allow for changes to Plan 2. Changes were then implemented through the consortium. Included changes are copays. If you go to the ER, $100 copay to help deter people from going to the ER because the cost is so significantly more. And we've seen changes. We've seen significant reductions in the use of the ER. And 4 or 5 other changes that have benefited our consortium. And then lastly, switching our carrier from Excelis to Empire during an RFP process. Siegel Consulting did notify us that we'd see significant savings. Those are coming to fruition. So we ended the year with $24.5 million in unrestricted net assets. At the end of September, we're now up to $30 million in unrestricted net assets. Very pleased to report that. And so as we go into rate setting, again, the rate setting happens alongside with our budget process and typically shakes out in around the February timeframe. So we'll be in a good financial position as we go into rate setting. Keep in mind, trend is typically 7 to 8% increase in healthcare cost as we go into that rate setting. TRS and ERS are the next items up on our agenda. So first item, let's jump into my sheet in our packet. I know not everybody has a packet in front of them. Is our TRS annual history. And this is just a good look for everyone to see. And I don't know if my window here is blocking, so I'm going to minimize that. There's fluctuations in TRS, and it happens pretty drastically. And again, when you look to the 20s and to 50s, obviously it's a completely different time. And hopefully we have a better understanding of actuarial sciences now. But those big fluctuations are crushing to school districts when you see large increases. And we do have a history of rates in here next that I'm going to pull up. And I'm going to tell you, this could be crippling to school districts. As the market changes, that is the biggest driver of income to our retirement systems. Teacher retirement system and our employee retirement system is how the market is performing and how are they doing on their returns with their investments. So jumping into the history of TRS, I'm going to show you a 6-year history. And many of you may recall when we went all the way up to 17.53%, we did have in that year, it was a 2-year growth to get to 17.53. But one of the large jumps was almost 5%. Now, for CVES purposes, a 1% jump is $100,000. So in that year, when you have a 5% jump, that is a $500,000 cost that you have to now budget for, and you have no changes in staffing. So I'm always weary, and we always have to be cautious here. And as we look at this, because we hope our retirement systems are doing well, and we always have to watch their returns. We did have a down year in TRS. Recently, it was below what they had budgeted for, similar to some other people that they've seen in the market. The election could play into that. We'll see what comes from the election. But we ended this current year, 2021, we had 9.53% as a contribution rate. TRS just announced on November 2nd, so yesterday, a range of 9.5% to 10%. So taking that 1% philosophy, CVES, if it does increase that 0.5%, the cost to us is $50,000. The board of TRS is working with an actuary now, and they will set rates for us. I believe within the next month to 2 months, we'll see what that final rate is. So good, that range isn't too high yet, but subsequent years could be heavily impacted based on what the returns in the market will be. Next is ERS, and I do have a short blurb here, and that is ERS is increasing just over 1.5%. When we look at ERS for CVES, what does that mean? Our salaries for these individuals are really our uncertified staff is approximately $5 million. So a 1.5% increase for us is approximately $75,000. So putting these two together, our potential impact budget-wise is $125,000 cost that we're going to be building into our budgets through our various coasters. I did include some additional information on the retirement system, more for knowledge purposes. This is something that we've been tracking as more and more people retire, and really what it means is people are passing away who are in tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 and 4. Tier 6 starts to take up a bigger chunk of the pie. And why that's important is that tier 6 members actually pay for their life of employment. So the whole time they're employed, they pay into the system. Whereas your tier 4 members only paid in their own contribution for the first 10 years of employment. They also have a higher rate of contribution, depending on their salary. I believe it can go up to 6 or 6.5% contribution. So that does help. They also have scaled down retirement benefits. So as the tier 6 take over, they should be able to build in more savings and more funds to invest in the market. And again, ERS, you're looking at 673 members. The public and police and fire retirement system is part of this as well, but ERS, employee retirement system, makes up 94%. Probably more details than you want to see, but again, that's something that's critical to us as we operate, again, because it could be a significant increase to cost without any changes in services. Any questions on our budget development factors? Excellent. I'm going to stop shares. We're going to engage in just really a general topic. We want to bring it to the committee's attention now. Just some items that we are looking at. And Assistant Superintendent Gray, I'm going to speak for a little bit, and hopefully I can do this justice for you and your expertise in these areas. The first, we're going to jump into some Instructional Services Center COSER discussions. One item we are monitoring right now is our ISC coasters, some of them have a base fee to participate in the service. And then you get charged as you use the service. And that base fee is really to cover those overhead costs so that Assistant Superintendent Gray can plan out her staffing and has funds to staff the coasters so that those services can then be provided. And those rates are, generally cost effective because the base fee is there to help cover some of those fixed cost, overhead costs, and so on. What we've done in the past and what we currently do is some districts, smaller districts per se, may have a one-off need here or there that Terry and team are providing a phenomenal training or a required training, such as like evaluator training. They may say, well, I'd like to do that. I'm not into coaster. Can I get in? And we allow them to join, but they pay 1.5 times the fee of the training. What we've seen is that some districts may be trying to take advantage of that model by saying we're not going to be in the coaster. We don't want to pay the base fee. Oh, but we can get in at 1.5 times the fee. We're going to save some significant costs doing so, or even some costs, and we're going to pick and choose which trainings we go to or which services we're going to use of that coaster, and that's becoming a challenge. And if we see it grow, it could be detrimental, or it will be detrimental to those coasters, because without the districts and those base fees, we don't have staff to provide any of those trainings or provide any of those services that they're paying billed as used. So it's something that we're looking at right now. We're analyzing it to say many different things, and we're going to bring a recommendation to this committee. I think is our future goal to say, do we eliminate that districts being allowed to participate unless they join the coaster and pay part of that base fee? Do we give them 1, 2 exceptions, 3 exceptions, whatever it is? And I know Terry is working on this and has recommendations, but we want to give you a heads up that this is coming down the pike. And depending on where we keep trending, again, we're only 2 months into the school year and 4 into the overall picture of the year. Depending on this trends, it may become more of an urgent matter where Dr. Davey may be making a recommendation to the board much sooner than next budget year. But this is something that's been brought to our attention. We've seen some districts, I'm going to say, just trying to play games with the coaster to see if they can nickel and dime the coaster to try to see if they can save money throughout the year. And it just doesn't work that way, and it can't work that way going into the future. So Terry, I hope I did that justice. And I know I'm taking most of your words from you, so you coached me up well.
You did well. Yes. Christine and I have been having conversations, but it's definitely a concern because they'd rather pay the little upcharge than they would the base fee because they're looking to save money, which we get. But at the same time, you can't expect to have those level of services without paying the base fee. So with it comes the staff. So that's the thing that we, and Christine said we really got to nip this in the bud before it becomes a practice because it could put us in a very tough situation.
Yep. So more to come on this. That's a hot item right now that we're looking at. The next, I call it a hot item. I don't know if that's the correct terminology. The next one in ISC or another one in ISC is the Interscholastic Athletics Coaster. And this, as our Section 7 Executive Director, Matt Wallentuck, is part of this coaster. And then now this year, brand new is the assigner. You probably recall from Dr. Davies' budget presentation, really outlining the change in this coaster and work closely with our districts and the officials organization. The assigner's now in this. And in June timeframe, we had a district not want to join the service, didn't like the way the methodology was, and tried to opt out of the service. That was squashed by Section 7 because you can't receive the services of Section 7 and not pay for those services. So that district did join, but a request was made by our CSOs that we investigate and look into the methodology for charging off that coaster. So the current one is based on Arwada to be part of that service. Take our budget, divvy up the Arwada, and that's how it's split up amongst our districts. So right now, Terry's working with Matt Wallentuck on seeing across the state, what are the other sections doing? Because we're not the only BOCES that does this. We've already talked to 2 or 3 and received what they're doing. And for the BOCES, it doesn't really matter to us how that methodology is done. However, we want to find something that is fair, is just, and we're not looking for a big school versus small school fight. This is the beauty of being on a BOCES, because what you always look for is equity, fair, and just in a methodology of charging out a COSER. That is our supreme goal as the BOCES, and that's what we're going to be. We are analyzing now, and we'll be making a recommendation to our districts. Now, it's not just our component districts. We have 26 districts in this COSER. So it actually extends throughout our neighboring BOCES, multiple BOCES, as part of this COSER. So it's something that Dr. Davies already met with all the schools. Terry's been involved in some of those meetings as we've gone through the athletic discussions, and this will be an ongoing topic as we lead up to our budget presentation in the spring. But these are conversations that will be happening over the next 2 months. So we want to bring it to your attention to let you know we are analyzing the methodology of this COSER. Any questions on our ISC COSER discussions, hot items that are happening right now?
So the only other point to weigh in on is there has been sports this fall. It was not a state level competition, but there were a number of districts, not all, but a number of our districts did play each other, and the athletes wore masks. And it seemed to go well. There is going to be an update coming up in the near future from the governor. The governor will decide what sports are going to be allowed and which ones are not. So the question is, will basketball be able to be allowed? Will hockey be able to be allowed? Will wrestling be able to? I mean, there's a good chance that many of the sports will not be allowed, but that he could allow some of them. So right now, I think you're going to wait and see. And if you think about COVID, is a shared basketball a chance to spread a virus? Or is wrestling a good, sport? So I think these are some of the athletic things that will come up. And then you throw on top of that, different sports and whether or not they're allowable.
It'll depend on how tough he's feeling.
And the rates, I think.
Yeah, and how much heat he can take. Because if you pick one sport over another, especially at high school level, you have now activated an entire community who probably didn't get along prior to that announcement. And now they band together.
Right. Understood. Yes. And I do want to give a shout out, for example, our athletic teams did get creative as well. For example, swimming. A number of our swim teams actually held meets that they swam in their own pools, but they posted the times together. So they would swim in both pools, but they would actually have timers, and then they would post the results and whoever finished. They actually had a 4-team pentathlon where all the teams swam in their own pools and then they pooled all the times, which is kind of a cool way to do it since you were with your teammates only. So
something to remember for really bad weather.
Yes.
Not a bad point. We have that often up here, like last night. So next item up is our CVES facilities update and our capital project in particular. So we had a very strong bid opening day at CVES. We were very pleased to be under budget or on budget with our prime contracts for all 6 areas of our prime contracts. We were very pleased to do that for this capital project. We took immediate efforts to address our special education division WAF roof. We saw an opportunity. We did not award that alternate. The board did not award that alternate as from a recommendation from our CVS team. A mini bid process was led and actual significant savings were found to replace that roof. So we did our first bid process. We've done that second bid process. We are analyzing on a regular basis and working with Schoolhouse Construction, Tetra Tech, our architects, right now, and analyzing all of our facility needs with the rest of our capital project, as well as the next 10 years of our capital project. So we are looking at our roofs at our satellite campus. We are looking at our windows at all campuses. We're looking at our doors at all campuses. So we're trying to come up with a plan for the next 5 to 10 years, again, with the mentality that we have this voter approved capital project. We're not expecting to see that again, if ever, for a very long time, nor do we want to ask that of our communities. So we're taking the approach of analyzing our current budget and financial situation, which Schoolhouse Construction defines as a very strong financial position for the capital project at this point in time of construction. We're analyzing that and working on trying to come up with a recommendation to the board on how we can have a long-term picture of improving our facilities through our capital project funds over the next 5 to 10 years. That's where we're at with the capital project, on schedule financially. We're very happy where we're at. Most of our walls have been ripped open. We hopefully have seen and are addressing the issues that may arise. So now we're focusing on completing those improvements with a goal of having those done by the end of September of 2021. Any questions on our capital project? Excellent. So I will wrap up by saying, again, I did a lot of talking today, but please realize that the team that is on your screen and Dr. Davey in the flesh here are really the masterminds behind this. I am the spokesperson to keep us on track, and it's easier in this digital environment to do so. So kudos to our team. I appreciate all your work on all of our financial aspects to this point this year, as well as our continued focus on being financially responsible for our districts and finding ways to provide cost-effective services going forward and being flexible to meet those needs. Our next meeting is going to be December 2nd. We will start to dive into those numbers. We shared with you some concerns today, items that we are watching very, very closely, and we will share, what do those numbers look like? What does that mean when we talk about short enrollments in different areas? We're going to show this budget committee those actual dollar figures where we're tracking. We'll dive into some heavy numbers on December 2nd, and then talk to you about how do we work on that the rest of the year, and then talk about what our budget development factors are at that time as well. So December 2nd, again, to be determined on whether we're going to do in person or hybrid. Today seemed to work pretty well, but Dr. Davey will be having those discussions with the committee as we move forward.
I just like coming to meetings.
Pardon?
I just like coming to meetings.
Yeah.
And I want to say thank you to everybody too. So, Mr. Slattery, you're new to me. I'm dyslexic. And everybody knows this. So that explains a lot of the extensive explanations. But what you guys did was, I'm going to go home and read it.
So Mrs. Saunders, thank you for being here. Mrs. Boyce, thank you for joining us remotely as well, and to our cabinet members. Nice to see you in the virtual realm. Mr. Bell, thank you for all your work and yours and Mrs. Myers to put this together and working with all of our team members to pull this together. So it was not only a productive meeting, but informational, also gave us insight about what's happening and the direction things are moving.
Pretty soon I'll be able to go see Michelle finally without something exploding on us.
Yes, right? That would be great. Thank you all so much. Eric, thank you for everything as always.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
See you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Terry.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.